People travel from all over the world to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. It draws suicides the way a field of clover draws honeybees. 1,200 confirmed cases between 1937, the year the bridge opened, and 2005, with an unknown number of unreported, unwitnessed jumps and unrecovered bodies which might be added to the toll. The 260-foot drop from the bridge deck, creating an average speed of 88 miles per hour at impact, makes surviving a jump highly unlikely. Factoring in the powerful tides, the cold water, and the presence of great white sharks, it's little wonder that only 26 survivors have been recorded. Many who survive the jump die soon afterwards of internal bleeding from ruptured spleens. Others have their bones shattered like glass. One tragic woman returned to the bridge and did the job right the second time, a few months after her first attempt. On average, someone jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge every 15 days, and that's only the official count. A disturbing image of a bee swarm massed on a branch, hanging over dark water, the branch breaking, plays repeatedly in the mind, the dark and bitter honey of existence that most of us, fortunately, never taste. Over 8 decades, however, thousands of people have lifted themselves over the railing and endured the final 4 seconds of their lives. Several survivors specifically mention regretting the decision to jump. How many of the Golden Gate suicides, the confirmed and unconfirmed, wanted everything back? Sunlight, touch, a voice, even their own sadness, as soon as they had let everything go. On July 18, 1955, in a heavy gray fog, a nattily dressed 41-year-old man, originally from Beatrice, Nebraska, pulled himself over the railing. Gaunt from the effects of the dexedrine he'd been taking for the past year, he already looked bodiless. His pale, pianist hands trembled, for he had lost his nerve on this same spot only a week before. The fog continued to roll in, thicker and thicker, a clotted, bitter cream. The man's dark, sorrowful eyes closed and opened. From out of the gray folds a gull screeched, the sound echoing away to silence. The man let go. 1 second. He had written so beautifully about regret and the ruinous harbors of the past. Was he feeling regret now? 2 seconds. Peace? 3 seconds. Terror? 4 seconds. His body was never recovered, but over a half-century later, far to the north of San Francisco, his life reached out and took hold of another. This is the story of the contact.
Tim Bowling reading from In the Suicides Library. It is one of the books that are being considered this year for the 2012 Alberta Reader's Choice Award, and it's a public vote starting on May 1st, and one of the 5 books will be the winner of that $10,000 prize. We'll be profiling each of those books over the next few weeks here on Daybreak. So we'll start with In the Suicides Library, and Tim Bowling is in the Daybreak Edmonton studio. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, Russell. Thank you.
Have you ever been on the Golden Gate Bridge?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but that particular question would be answered if you read the book. But the book has got a real mystery element to it, so I kind of like to leave that question open for now.
I was on the Golden Gate Bridge just before Christmas. I was a little surprised by it.
Okay. I hope in a cheerful mood, not like some people are.
Well, I definitely was in a cheerful mood, and I was surprised by, I don't know, I guess I was expecting more.
Is that right?
The bridge has become the stuff of legend, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely. It's iconic. It's one of those great sort of symbols of America, really, and it's filled with romance, but of course, romance comes attended by the underbelly of romance, partly what I explore in my book.
The book is partly about book collections. Are you the type of person, when you go into someone's house, you do have a little look at their book collection to see what they actually read?
I don't know that I'm judging people according to what they read, but I do gravitate towards any collection of books just to see. I think I tend to focus more on the books than the person who owns them. It is a library is a reflection of a person. The idea of a personal library is something that, on the one hand, has maybe gone a little bit out of style, but is also becoming more and more important these days as the material book itself becomes somewhat threatened and we move on into the digital age more and more. So the actual material books, just like having CDs as a collection now. These things may be disappearing from our lives.
So much of what gets evoked in this book is that idea of old books and that smell.
Yeah.
There's a smell that comes from a new book that is unmistakable, but on the same side, whether it's in a library or maybe it's in someone's extensive personal collection, there is a tremendous connection to the smell of a book.
Well, books are absolutely tactile. I'm a lover of the material book, and one of the reasons why is simply because they're so human. Part of that humanity is we're all made of time. As a book ages, it does develop that smell, which gives it a sense of the past and, that must that comes from having survived. And if you're a book lover and a big reader, that smell is very familiar to you, probably from childhood. There's something warm about it. It's like the smell of coffee, I guess, for people who love coffee.
Well, smell and memory are very much connected.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're talking about this, I'm just looking to the side here. I've got an iPad in the studio with me.
Yeah.
As you were answering that question, I actually picked it up to smell it.
Oh, yeah.
It is so sanitized that there is no smell. There isn't that connection.
Well, and it's not just smell. I mean, the whole key part of my book, what sets it off, is I find a book that has an ownership signature in it. So there's a human trace, not just smell, but if you're looking through books, you might find an old bus transfer or, somebody's recipe card or, some doodle that someone's left in a book. You're just made aware of how much books are a part of the great human pageant, and I'm not sure that the technologies we have today are leaving that human trace.
How much of a fan of mystery are you?
Oh, well, every day I'm sort of blown away by the mystery of life, the mystery of existence. Everything strikes me as mysterious. But if you mean the specific idea of mystery in terms of the genre, I can remember taking university courses when I was much younger than I am now and sitting in the back row and reading Raymond Chandler when I should have been reading something else or paying attention. So it's a good question because this book, I'm glad you brought that up because I do like to stress that the book does have a definite mystery element in it.
It's something that seems quite eternal, though, in the discussion around reading, and just I think in our lives in general, is that anything that's hidden from us is suddenly the most important thing we need to find out about. When you're a kid, if you're told not to watch certain shows, it suddenly becomes very, very important. And I guess for people who are fans of this particular genre or fans of mystery, it's that ability to hide the truth that actually keeps them engaged.
Well, it's the pull of narrative. I mean, It really is the traditional pull. It's really why we turn the pages. Fundamentally, you can talk about symbolism and metaphor and all sorts of big literary words, but I'm a big believer that literature is first and foremost a form of entertainment and a compelling form, and one of the things that a writer must rely on. And mystery is maybe not exactly the term, but there's certainly suspense, the idea of finding out what's going to happen next. And in the Suicides Library is definitely a quest narrative. There's a quest that the narrator goes on, that I go on. I'm hoping that the reader comes along and wants to know what happens next.
Should I ask why the concept of quest is so important to you?
I'm middle-aged now, Russell, and how do we get out of a rut that you can fall into losing the savor of life if you don't find ways to continually excite yourself and interest yourself. For North Americans in particular, often boredom can be a big enemy. And so one of the ways that we have to keep ourselves moving forward with interest and excitement and passion for life is to set ourselves these quests. And they don't have to be big dramatic things. I talk about this book as being a kind of a mini, mild midlife crisis in which I don't go destroying my family life by chasing after young women or buying, expensive sports cars that I can't afford. Instead, I get a little more interested in books as collectible things. So what we need is external stimuli. We need something outside of ourselves, outside of our own heads, to get us engaged with life and make life interesting.
The quest that you went on in terms of investigating that American literature of the 40s and 50s, what did you discover about the era that surprised you, and what did you find perhaps timeless about it?
Well, Wallace Stevens' poetry collection. I'm in the Rutherford Library at the University of Alberta, and I'm looking at books, and I pull out a collection of Wallace Stevens' poems, and an ordinary-looking book, and I flip it open, and there's this beautiful signature by a man named Weldon Keyes. All by itself on a page, gorgeous calligraphic black signature, and I happened to recognize the name, Weldon Keyes. I thought, well, this is odd. Why would this book be here? I knew Weldon Keyes was a cult figure and what he was famous for. He had either jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge in 1955 or he had disappeared into Mexico. He talked about doing both things. That book basically set me off. I wanted to find out more about Weldon Keys, and of course that involved finding out about the American literature of the 40s and 50s. And what I really found in Weldon Keys himself is this incredible tension between a desire for a sort of order and form in the work that he was doing, to the desire to be an artist and to live the artist's free existence. Not bohemian exactly, but to sort of live by your art. So that contrast between the dictates of art and commerce, I think, is much the same as artists are living with today. It's the same thing. How do you finance the art that you want to do in a world where, you've got to make a living? And so I got attracted to Weldon Keys simply because that struggle is always there for me. And I realized when I looked into his life and his biography that you could make a case that one of the things that drove him to the edge of the bridge, he was a very talented, very gifted man in a lot of fields. He was a real Renaissance figure. He was an abstract expressionist painter. He hung around with Jackson Pollock and those people in New York. He was from Nebraska originally. He was an avant-garde filmmaker and photographer, and he was all these wonderful things, a poet and a novelist, but he simply never had a commercial breakthrough at all. So I sort of became fascinated just by the timelessness of the artist's struggle to finance what they really feel they need to do.
And Tim, what keeps you going?
Well, all sorts of things, but the beauty of writing, and I work a lot with younger writers, and one of the things that is so wonderful about writing is there's no end point, because there's no point at which you can say, oh, I've got it now. It's perfect. I'm done. And you always want to be chipping away, and pushing towards achieving something in language that has some permanence to it, and also that gives pleasure. And I really hope that with this book, I should finally add that the Suicides Library, Weldon Keys himself was a book collector. And the only thing he had after he disappeared and or died of any value was his library. So this book in the Suicides Library, and basically in his library, and partly what I set out to do, Russell, is to see how many of his books I could recover. I'm kept going by my fascination with life and with all sorts of things that people get up to. And once I lose that interest, then the old ticker will probably stop ticking away.
Well, Weldon Keys asked that question in the book, and just before he vanishes, so hopefully he won't vanish on us, but we are coming to the end of our time here this morning. But congratulations on the nomination.
Okay, thanks so much, Russell. I appreciate it.